fellow travelers, and welcome to the Versus Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because Alan Barinholtz boards the mothership. You know him from jury duty on Freevee. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Barinholtz. Thank you so much for coming to Traversing the Stars podcast.
Well, first of all, Jeff, it's my pleasure. Second of all, call me Alan, please.
I certainly will. It's a pleasure to have you on, Alan. I'm a big fan of your show, and I'm really glad you came on.
Well, it's nice to be invited at this age. What can I tell you?
So I always start off with the question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for acting and who your earliest influences?
Well, let's see. I think when I was in high school, 50 plus years ago, I got involved in theater my junior and senior year. And I got the lead in Guys and Dolls. I was Nathan Detroit, and that kind of got me excited. Then I went on to Ohio State. I graduated 50 years ago with a BFA in acting. And then I did some stand-up comedy for a couple of years. And then I realized I wasn't making a lot of money, meaning that I think I made $100. And then I was having a drink with a buddy of mine. At the time, I was selling radio time from a boiler room, the expression. And I was doing okay, but it was not satisfying. And a buddy of mine, who I knew from high school, was on break from law school, and he was talking about law school. And I thought, maybe getting a law degree might be good if I want to go into business. Never gave up my love for acting, but I decided to go to law school in 1977 and kind of been practicing law since 1980 and still am licensed, still practice, and I love it. But there's this theater thing that's kind of been stuck in my blood for over 50 years.
So stand-up comedy, that hasn't been really hard. What kind of comedy was it? Was it like observational? Was it observational humor?
I'm only a joke teller amongst friends and family. I'm observational when I'm on stage.
So is comedy harder than, let's say, practicing law? I mean, what they say, dying, dying is easy, comedy is hard. So compare comedy to going to law school.
Studying for the bar was the hardest thing I ever did. And I probably could have done 12 hours of stand-up comedy rather than studying for the bar. So I think studying for the bar was harder, with all due respect.
So I can't help but imagine that understanding law helps a lot with your business as an actor. So is there overlap? Are you able to now look at a contract and go, nope?
Did you say a contract?
Oh, yes, a contract.
Well, see, that's a good question that you asked, because if I strictly did transitional work, contracts, real estate, corporate stuff, I don't think I would have succeeded at this stage of my career in theater. What my area of practice has been in law, I've been primarily a personal injury attorney. I'm a litigator. I try cases. So when you try cases, you're in front of 12 men and women, and that's kind of similar to playing to an audience of 500, except a lot less jokes.
Is it a performance, speaking in front of jurors and a judge?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, obviously, you have to know the facts. You have to know the case. You have to know the law. And you have to argue. But you also have to kind of make it exciting, not boring, for jurors. Mm. And I've presented people with boring testimony, and I've presented people with exciting testimony. But when you really get to shine, in my opinion, as a trial attorney, is when you're either cross-examining a witness or you're doing your opening statement or your closing argument. That's when you put the schmaltz in it, so to speak.
So it just fascinates me, an actor also, like I said, being an attorney. So one also important aspect of acting as well is memorizing of lines, things of that nature. So how much of what you do as an attorney is memorized? How much is it ad-libbed? Does that help you as well ad-libbing as an actor?
Well, the short answer there is if you don't know your shit as an attorney, ad-libbing may help you a tiny bit, but you have to know the facts and you have to know the law. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, when you take a deposition, when you are asking a witness questions under oath, I remember as a rookie, I had this entire checklist and it was boring. I'd ask a question, check it off, ask a question, check. And it took me a few years just to realize, okay, just have an outline. Make sure you cover this, make sure you cover this, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to know the facts. It's not necessarily, Jeff, a question of memorization. It's just a question of understanding your case. Improvisation really helps. It really does. But knowing your case is key to being a successful attorney.
So as a successful attorney, when did you decide you also wanted to try going back into acting, or was it always going,
No, it wasn't. In answer to your question, I started practicing law in 1980, and shortly before then, I gave up some of the writing that I had done, writing sketches and things, and performing. And probably not until the mid-aughts, in 2008, my older son had moved to LA in 2001, and he became a successful actor and a successful writer. His name is Ike Barinholtz. And I remember when he moved to LA, he got cast on Mad TV, and he was on Mad TV for 5 years, and then his career just went crazy. So he's pretty well known. He wrote and helped show run and executive produce and acted in History of the World Part 2, which is on streaming now, and he's done just a ton of stuff in movies. So I got to live a little bit vicariously through him. And my younger son, John, was living back in Chicago at the time, which is where I'm from. And he and his best friend, Rob Belushi, who's the nephew of John, they came to me and said, we want to do this play. It was This Is Our Youth by Kenneth Lonergan, one of the best American playwrights alive. And I said, so why are you talking? He said, well, we'd like you maybe to think about producing it. And I said, wow. And that was the quickest $7,500 I lost ever. But the play was successful. And I got to meet the director, a fellow by the name of Matt Miller. And Matt kind of recognized, for want of better words, that I had some acting chops. So he said, I'm going to do a Reader's Theater piece. And the Reader's Theater piece was called The Exonerated. And it was about 5 or 6 vignettes about men and women who were on death row and were exonerated. So I was the narrator for that. And then he had me audition for the 50th anniversary of the play, the musical Grease, which was made in Chicago. And one of the playwrights was still alive, and he partnered with our director. So they didn't just have the parts for the younger people. It was like we were all at our high school reunion looking back 50 years. And I played the valedictorian. And I had, this was probably in 2000. I'll tell you when it was. It was when I was turned 60 in 2011. And I acted in it. I actually got paid, I think, $27 a performance.
Oh, nice. That's for, hey, when you get paid, you're professional, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. I didn't have to join Actors Equity, but it was a gas. So that really kind of stuck with me. And that's more than 10 years ago. And then my younger son became successful. He was a regular at Superstore and a regular in American Auto, my younger son, John. And so I had 2 kids out in Hollywood, and I lived vicariously through them. But I never thought that something like jury duty would ever happen. I stopped acting for all intents and purposes, but I always was peripherally involved in theater, not as an actor, but maybe as a patron and helping raise funds.
I think that's fantastic. And I would say jury duty is one of the most fascinating concepts I've heard in a long time. Kind of remind me a little bit of the movie The Truman Show, if you know which one I'm talking about. And it seemed like the perfect combination of reality TV, which exists, it's becoming increasingly popular all the time, and the greatness of scripted sitcom.
Yeah,
and it was really great. And you play Judge Alan Rosen on the show. So how did you get involved with it?
So long story short, maybe a little longer. We always would come out to LA for Thanksgiving with the kids. And like 2 days before we were due to arrive, Ike called up and said, hey, Allison Bills, which was, I knew Allison, I knew her sister. I had done some legal work for them in Chicago. I said, sure. He said, she works for a showrunner, and the showrunner asked Allison, do you know any attorneys or lawyers? I'm saying attorneys or judges who are retired or semi-retired who maybe have a tiny bit of improv experience? And Allison said, well, yeah, kind of. Our family attorney, when his sons would come into town and they did improv, they'd always invite him up on stage. So, and you know his sons, blah, blah, blah. And then the word got back to the casting agency, Susie Ferris Casting, and they reached out to Ike and said, see if your dad is interested in auditioning. So I said to my son, what do I have to do? He said, well, when you're out here in a few days, we'll go up to my office. We'll shoot a 1-minute tape. Very easy. Yeah, fine. And John and Ike and my wife helped out, just, filming it. It was pretty simple. I kind of put together a conglomeration of all the judges that appeared in front of, over 40 years. And Ike and John said, hey, this is pretty good tape. They sent it in to the casting agency, and a day later, I got an email from the casting agency saying, you're a strong pin for the judge. And I said, oh, what the hell does that mean? And my kids said, Pop, they're actually considering you for this show. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. I didn't want to get my hopes up, et cetera, et cetera. He said, well, you don't want to hear anything this week. It's Thanksgiving. And I didn't hear anything for a month. And by the third week, I completely put it out of my mind. And then 4 weeks later, I got a phone call from the director saying, listen, I know your son, I know you live on a farm in Ohio. You have to live in LA for about 2.5 months. Are you willing to do that? And I said, does it cost me anything? And he said, well, you'll have to join the union. You're not going to get paid a lot, but I don't think you'll lose money. And I said, and I thought about it for a couple of days. I talked to my wife about it. My boys both said, if you don't do this, you're nuts. And I did it. And that was it.
That's the most fascinating pitch. You may not lose money. That's an odd little pitch to give somebody.
And my kids said, hey, you know what? When you were thinking about it, even if you would have lost money, you would have regretted not doing this. So the short answer is, I'm delighted I did it.
When they finally told you the premise of the show, what was your reaction? What did you what interested you about it, and was there any aspect of it as well that kind of made you nervous?
Yeah, me and a bunch of the cast members were a little bit trepidatious because this premise had the ability to go south, to go wrong, and to be mean-spirited. So that was, I didn't want it to be a prank show. And when we had the opportunity to rehearse for 2 full weeks before Ronald showed up, and during those 2 weeks, it made me more at ease that this wasn't going to be a gotcha. And then when Ronald showed up and he was the real deal, I slept a lot easier.
One thing, when they're talking about how long you're going to be there for 2 months or whatever length of time of the actual shooting, obviously, at least in my thoughts, was the moment Ronald figures out and the jig is up, the show has to be over at that point. Correct. So what was there a constant sense of this could be the day that ends it?
They had backup plans.
Okay.
They had backup plans that if this didn't work, they were going to go on to somebody else and possibly somebody else. And the reality, Jeff, was it might not have worked with all 3. Ronald was an A+. He was a grand slam home run from the get-go. And we couldn't believe how lucky we were.
And the other part too, though, is Ronald himself, because he's not an actor, because he's not cast, you don't know what he is. I mean, if he turned out to be a complete asshole, that would have really changed the dynamics of the entire show, I would imagine.
There would not have been a show with Ronald.
Yeah. And so, like I said, just psychologically, what was it like to just be in that mindset for days and days, you're not knowing where this was going to go with not only just Ronald, but the show itself?
Well, myself and the legal team were separated from everybody else when there wasn't courtroom activity. We actually used an abandoned courthouse. It was in Huntington Park, and the courthouse had been shut down, and presumably the producers got permission from the city. They revamped a little bit. It still looked a little bit run down. In fact, the premise to everybody, including Ronald, was, you see the building's a little dilapidated. This will be my last trial, because after this trial, they're closing down the courthouse. They're not going to do anything. So we had that going for us. The jury would say, and obviously Ronald was told, as were the other jurors, actors, that this was going to be a documentary. You signed up to be a juror. You didn't have to be a Los Angeles, or for that matter, a California resident. Ronald, amongst 2,500 other people, answered an ad in Craigslist, and I think they disclosed this in the last episode. And the premise was, if you've never served on a jury before and you wish to take part, you will be in a documentary. If you're chosen, you'll be paid something like $400 a day, plus your room and board. You do not have to be a California resident, but you have to, be screened, etc. And of the 2,500 people, he got picked. We, the lawyers and the plaintiff and the defendant, every time we weren't on camera, but we had to be there, we went back into my chambers. And for all intents and purposes, that's where we hung out. That was our dressing room. That, we hung out there. We never really interacted with the jurors. And I forgot your original question. Was I nervous?
Yeah, because like I said, literally at any moment, it could have been, like I said, the jig could have been up, it could have been blown, and now you don't have a show, or at the very least, potentially, if you're the one too who blows it, was that safe for you?
I think one time, I know, and it's shown in the one of the episodes, Nikki the bailiff, her real name is Rashida. She's a great Chicago stand-up comedian. We had a huge Chicago connection, me and a bunch of other players. And they showed her walking the hallway with the jurors saying, Cassandra left her purse, or something like that. Cassandra was one of the actresses, but that wasn't, that was her real name. Yeah. And Ronald said, who's Cassandra? And Nikki Sheeds ignored it. And then the producers were smart enough to make sure they covered that. So there were people daily in the courthouse, and they got one woman who was in the courthouse on a daily basis. And when Ronald was around, Nikki said, Cassandra, we found your purse. And so they covered that. One time I referred to Nikki, I said Sheeds, and that's a little bit less, that's a little bit more innocuous than calling her Rashida. I say, so it was never picked up. Ronald never caught on there. The one time that I thought it was going to get blown was the fellow who played Todd, David Brown, the inventor, the kind of on the spectrum young man with the chair pants.
Yes.
I said, and that's the only time that I almost lost it. I just, it was crazy. And they wanted to perpetuate that so that he would be sitting in the jury box throughout the course of the trial with these. And I said, you can't do that. I mean, I wasn't the decider, but they got the sense that that would be a bridge too far. So I'm glad that that bit didn't continue on. I think that would have been a little too much, but it was pretty damn funny.
How did you not lose character for hours a day when all that craziness is happening in your courthouse?
It's called improv and acting.
Yeah. But I must admit, I mean, even when you watch a TV show, a sitcom, people they'll break character and start laughing, and they got to do reshoots. You didn't have the ability to do a reshoot. If you lost character, you're done.
No. And frankly, the legal team, the parties, they had it considerably easier than the jurors, because the jurors were stuck in a room sometime for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, where they had to stay in character. And they had a harder job than we did, in my opinion, because they were always surrounded by Ronald. So it was a little bit easier for us.
So on average, how long was your workday in the courthouse?
We got there always a minimum of 2 to 3 hours before Ronald came from the hotel. I mean, this is obviously after the third day when they were sequestered. So we all got there. They had calls as early as 6:15 in the morning. and we would go over the beats of the day. And when I say beats, it wasn't, I would say, Jeff, it was maybe 15% scripted and 85% improv. So it was just these ideas, and we had a certain amount of beats that we had to consider. So we had days, the earliest I was ever there was at 6:15, leaving at 7:30 at night. So we had 12, 13-hour days. Some days were 5 or 6 hours, but it wasn't, oh, come on in for an hour today.
So when you're creating your judge character, how did you approach constructing this character? Was there a particular judge you kind of borrowed from that was, a real guy? How did you go about that?
There were approximately 300 particular judges that I borrowed from. I've been in front of great judges. I've been in front of horrible judges. I've been in front of, basically I channeled 3 or 4 judges. I've been in front of judges who were so nice and just so accommodating. And I've been in front of judges who were dicks. They were just, there was no pleasing them, and they would sit on the bench as though they were God. Those were the worst judges, but you had to kiss their ass because you didn't want a bad ruling. So yeah, I kind of channeled the best of both of those.
So, because like you said, so much of it is ad-libbed. Was there pressure to try to be funnier than, to get a laugh that you knew the sitcom would get, or was it play it straight and let the story tell itself? What was your approach?
I think the latter, with a few exceptions. I mean, I do like to improvise, but I also couldn't play it for laughs because I'm the one who has to keep everybody grounded. If I start riffing, this guy Ronald's going to say, what is this guy? What is he, a stand-up? So I really had to keep it grounded. The only thing that I can think of there towards the end, when Ben, who played the defendant, fired his attorney, and he was examining himself, and they didn't cover all of it in the show, but he kept going back, and he would stand here at the desk, and then he would run to the witness box, and I said, wait a second, this isn't the movie Bananas, which is well before your time. But there was a scene where Woody Allen was cross-examining himself and doing that. And I made that comment, which I thought was pretty damn funny. And only a few of my friends caught it. But I tried not to be funny for once in my life.
So how did you try to anticipate what Ronald was going to do? Because he is such an X factor on the show, because like I said, any minute he could turn out to not be a good mood. You don't know him well enough necessarily to know how he's going to respond to things. So how did you try to anticipate what he was going to do?
Well, for the record, from everything that I saw, especially in the early days, he was always in a good mood. I mean, he was a nice kid. And he was respectful. When Susan, the older juror who kept falling asleep, and I said, keep her, and Ronald was respectful. And the only time that I was concerned was the last day when we were going to do the reveal. And they gave me the honor of being the one to spill the beans, so to speak. And they didn't know how he was going to react. I certainly didn't know how he was going to react. And I don't think they showed this, but the director, Jake Szymanski, said, look, if this goes south when you're telling him, tell him, we're giving you a lot of information here. You want to come into my chambers for a few minutes and try to take this all in? Let's do that. And I did say that to him. And he said, no, I think I'm okay. So that was really the only time that I was concerned that he might explode. But given watching him for almost 3 weeks, I thought this kid was a pretty solid kid.
I must say, having watched the show and watching Ronald, you guys got so damn lucky that he was just the perfect personality. He was, kind-hearted, responsible, apparently even-tempered, and I guess on some level naive enough to think it was real as well. That's an amazing combination you had with this guy.
Yeah, he made an interesting comment. He and I got to do some events for promo afterwards, and he was asked did you ever think that this was a prank, that something was up? And he had made a comment, I think, to Marsden, something, Jesus feels like a reality show. And he said that. And what he said when he was questioned about that, he said, there were times, but then I thought, but not it can't be that I'm the only one who doesn't know.
Yeah.
So he said, that just went out of my mind. Like the Truman Show. Like Jim Carrey was the only person who had no idea and couldn't conceive it. So we got very lucky.
And when you finally had the reveal, and like I said, you got to do the reveal and not knowing if he was going to lose his shit, when he found out that everyone around him was basically lying to him, how soon did you think that carrot telling him how much money he was going to make on it? Was that always part of it? And was that something you put out that was going to be thrown out there if he started losing it?
No. That was we were going to reward him money. I mean, when they told me you're doing the reveal, oh, and by the way, he's getting $100,000. I said, that's better than $400 a day.
Yeah. I mean, I can't help to think that, like, was that something though that, and when you were telling if he was starting to lose it, how were you going to, like, was that money going to come out quicker? Like, oh, but keep in mind, you're getting all this money, please calm down. Or was it
nope.
just really
just keep doing your thing and doing your thing. And I was told you at the very end, you say, and this court hereby awards you the sum of, boom. And so we just I had to obviously pace myself to see how he was doing. And I mean, Jeff, imagine for 3 weeks, you've been in close quarters with these people. You haven't had your cell phone. You don't have communication for all intents and purposes with the outside world. And then at the very end, when the judge says, come up here. Now, this was your verdict. This is it. Okay, well, let me tell you something. Just so you know, I'm not a real judge. What? You're not a real, but you're the person who, and you're sitting there thinking, what the fuck? I mean, and he just sat there, and it was going in, and then all of a sudden, people stood up and said, remember when you did this? And Ken, Ron's song, said, you didn't take my money, and you know, and Marsden said the thing about, you know, taking a dump in the toilet. I mean, yeah, he's taking all this in, and it's just an incredible amount of luck with an incredible person.
Well, speaking of James Marsden, once again, big celebrity. He plays one of the jurors. He's just not a juror. He's a alternate. He's an alternate juror.
Right.
What was it like having him on set? And also, because he's part of the show, did you get to interact with him off set? And what was that experience like?
My older son and James were friends. They were colleagues, and so that was very nice. What I knew of James, I had seen a couple of his movies. He's a handsome young man. He's a talented young man. I didn't know, and I know that, you know, he did some light comedy in some of these movies. I had no clue that as a comedic actor he was stellar. And we got he's there's a word in Yiddish, mensch. He's a real person, and he personified that, as did Ronald. James was a lot of fun to work with.
It's kind of funny when he's on the show. He brings so much attention to himself when he's on screen as well. Is there a sense when he was there that attention would be drawn to him as well as the alternate juror?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, what I enjoyed more than anything, and they cut this, I love giving him shit as the judge. The one witness, the influencer, her name is Lisa. I can't remember Lisa Gilroy. She's the one who was reading the tweets about how, you know, I never want to do business with you. She was great. We had no idea. When I say we, I'm talking about everybody but James, and I think one or two other people knew that there was going to be this other witness. We had a break one day, and during that day, Lisa came in to be this witness. So I had no idea. So when we got there, you know, our 2 hours or 3 hours early, the director said, put her on, you know, start doing it. Let's just riff. And we started working together, and we actually shot this in front of Ronald when he was there. Lisa's sitting, talking about, yeah, she was my friend, and now people don't want to do business with her, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, she looks in the gallery, and she sees Marsden sitting there. And she says, James? And I'm just sitting there making notes and stuff. And she says, James, is that you? And I look up, and Marsden, she says, hi, James, it's me, so-and-so. And I look, I said, wait a minute, whoa, stop it. What are you doing? She says, oh, I know him. And Marsden's shaking his head. And I said, stop it. And she keeps talking. And I said, be quiet. And I said, get up here, sir. And he comes up, and he's standing in front of me with the two attorneys on either side. And I say, you know this woman? I mean, I was irate, and I had no idea this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I know a lot of people, but she says, oh, come on, James. We were all at that party on the boat. I said, if you talk again, I'll hold you in contempt. And it was why they cut that. I mean, obviously they had time constraints. And I really gave Marsden shit about, knowing people, etc. Likewise, when he had the paparazzi come in. So it was a lot of fun working with him.
I can just imagine. So is there, I mean, the show was amazingly successful. Is there talk of a second season?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is, how can they do a second season with us? I mean, Jeff, in my wildest imagination, I just thought that I was going to do this thing. It was getting the acting thing out of my, out of my blood, so to speak, or out of my system. I never in my wildest dreams imagined that it would have the response that it is having. I mean, it's crazy. My older son sent me a tweet that somebody put out there. And it said, enough with the Supreme Court and 9 judges. All we need is one judge who knows how to have fun and is intelligent. And they had a picture of me on the bench. And I mean, it got tens of thousands. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I mean, come on. And so we're recognizable now. And I don't know how you do that. I mean, a bunch of the producers worked with Sacha Baron Cohen on the second Borat movie, and they pulled it off. So theoretically, there could be a second season involving us. I think it's going to be very difficult.
Well, I hope so, because I mean, you're such a great part of the show. It'd be nice to see. I mean, I get why the jurors might not be able to pull it off again, but you would hope you get to do it as the judge and come back. What's next for you?
Well, I moved out here. At the time I was living on a farm in Ohio. I'm not a farmer, but my wife and I were living on the farm that she grew up on. And we moved out here last October. So now I'm a Los Angelino. And my kids helped me get a commercial agent and a business agent for film and TV. I've filmed an episode of Physical, which is on Apple, and I guess that'll come out this fall. I filmed an episode of an NBC show called St. Dennis, just one scene, but I was not up against, but in the scene with David Allen Greer, which, never in my imagination could I have thought that. There's going to be work. Just after the show broke in May, the Writers Guild went on strike. They are still on strike. We'll know less than a week from now if the Screen Actors Guild will be on strike. So the short answer is, once the strike or strikes are over, I think I'm going to have a few things on my plate, which is fine with me.
That is awesome, sir. And you're always welcome back on the show, Mr. Barinholtz. Absolute honor to have you on the show, sir.
Hey, Jeff, this was great. Thank you so much.
Totally my pleasure. Thank you. Have a fantastic.
Take care of yourself.